Guess who's back? Back again.
Don't ever do that. You're listening to Christian and an Atheist Walk into a Bar. I am your missing in action host, Jay Stooksbury, and with me on the back of the milk carton is Ty Gallenbeck.
That's right. We have been found and discovered. It would have happened a lot sooner if they would have used beer cases instead of milk. They would have found us sooner. But all the people that know us wouldn't know where to look.
But what matters is that we're here.
That's right. We are back.
You know, for those that are going to, turn into our podcast on episode 200, it's like nothing's happened,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for those that have been waiting, we're just going to call this season 2, like we planned this whole thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Right. Totally intentional.
Exactly.
So what have you been up to, man?
So I don't even know when our last episode aired. It was a good one.
Yeah,
it was the immigration one.
It was.
It was wonderful. But since then,
what was happening was not wonderful, but it was a good episode.
Right. Well, and that continues at this point. But since then, we've moved. We're at a new bar.
Right.
A heated bar, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, it is.
Especially considering it was snowing in Colorado today. So new house, new bar. Had my father-in-law pass away since our last episode, and so all of that combined kind of made it where we just took some time and didn't rush anything back. So, what have you been up to?
Nothing. I've just been sitting, patiently waiting in your garage to come out and record a podcast really well. No, I started a new job that's not very exciting, but it pays the bills. And yeah, that's really all we've been doing lately. So yeah, my life is pretty boring. So hopefully this will bring some spark back into it.
That's right. And to come back, we decided we were going to reach out because you actually created, I don't know, you didn't create it, I guess, but you put a post up on our Facebook page that, in my world, went viral. It didn't really go viral, but it got a lot of traction, and so we have a lot of new followers and new people, and so we decided that we're going to do a Q&A session as we come back.
But as per usual, we should always lead off with, what are we drinking?
Oh, that's right. See, I've even forgotten.
We're right.
You're right. So tonight we're actually drinking some Eli Mason Old Fashions. Eli Mason is a company out of Nashville, Tennessee. I had put off trying their stuff forever because I have not had a old-fashioned syrup that I liked. And they finally did a Black Friday or Cyber Monday sale that made it where I was like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. Everyone says it's really good. And so got it in, tried it, and it actually is. It's delicious.
It is delicious.
It's super simple. It makes making them way easier. So that was awesome.
Yeah.
So we're drinking that tonight. So if you're looking for a Christmas gift for the cocktail lover in your life, go check out Eli Mason, Elimason. Eli Mason syrups. They're good stuff.
Yeah.
We needed something to get this thing going. So so yeah, let's jump in. Let's jump into a few of these questions here.
Sure. So as Ty alluded to, we had reached out to our audience for a good amount of questions. I think should be enough to cover an episode, and a good mixture too. Some funny, some more serious. So I tried to balance those out as we're going through them. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with, obviously, the very most important question from Shelby Reeder. For both of you, does pineapple belong on a pizza? I'm very interested and await your response. Thank you. Well, I'll just go ahead and ask you. Do you think that pineapple belongs on a pizza?
Well, first off, I want to point out that, Shelby, if you are very interested in awaiting our decision, you should note that our last episode was like 4 months ago. So you should never await anything from us.
You're going to be hanging out in the garage with me.
But on the question of pineapple on pizza, I always go with this. In any restaurant, anywhere, is there any other fruit that ever goes on pizza? And the answer is no. No, because fruit does not belong on pizza.
Bananas.
No.
Strawberries.
Peaches.
Peaches.
No. Why did this one fruit get to sneak in and ruin it?
Yeah, I guess we really should have looked up the history on this beforehand, because there's got to be some story behind that.
Well, they call it Hawaiian.
Right.
Like, I don't know if that's where it originated or not, but that could just be to make it sound
like
better.
Cultural appropriation.
My biggest problem with it, though, it's not even the flavor.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't mind the like sweet and the salty from the ham or whatever. It's the fact that like the juices make your pizza like soggy.
Right.
Like, that's my biggest problem with it.
It kind of makes it. And I'm not fully aware of it either, too. But one of the best things about pizza is having it as leftovers, and I feel like that kind of compromises its ability to be a good leftover, unless you eat it cold, I guess.
Yeah,
Cold pizza's fine.
Oh, I don't like cold pizza either. That's a whole nother topic of this discussion.
Right. I agree with you. I'm not a fan. I will never judge people for their pizza choices.
Right.
So it's Shelby, if that's the right pizza for you, then that's great. I will order separately if that's okay. It actually kind of reminds me of the story of my dad. The very first time I ever went to Bojo's, which for those of you who are not familiar, Bojo's pizza is this, at its time, was kind of a niche pizza place up in Idaho Springs, which those of us on the Front Range, whenever we were going up into the mountains, we okay?
We should be okay.
Okay, sorry. When we were going up for the mountains for camping, that we would stop in there and grab a bite to eat, and it's really good pizza. But and we were with one of our friends who always had kind of a revolving girlfriend, and this new version of the girlfriend ordered pineapple pizza and ordered it for the group, and my dad had a public hissy fit about it and actually said, well, while you're eating your California bullshit, we will get a real American pizza. Which I don't know what a real American pizza is, but it obviously does not have pineapple on it.
Apparently not.
So that's what I was indoctrinated with at a young age. So I might be biased, but I agree. I'm not a fan of pineapple on pizza.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Your dad was ready to build a wall.
He was,
to
keep those Hawaiians out. It's like, Dad, there's an ocean there. Might be hard.
Technically, they're American.
All right, were you good with that one?
Yeah,
okay.
I think we settled that.
Done. Slam the gavel. All right, next one from Shanna Lee. Her question for both of us is, what's the worst thing you or someone you know has been subjected to because of their beliefs? That's a tough one.
That's a crazy question.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the hardest part of this for me is that the inclusion of someone I know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I have a couple of friends that have done a trip called the World Race where they do 11 countries in 11 months. And it's missionary based, and it's very servant oriented, and it's not necessarily the like, hey, look at us, we're building you a house. Like, it's very needs based, and it's got some cool stuff. But I have also heard stories of like being thrown in jail on these trips and stuff like that. And so to describe someone else's experience because of their faith is tough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of struggled with the same thing.
So do you have one specifically for you that you can think of?
Yeah. So like you said, I struggled with this starting off with me because I actually feel like I've had a pretty privileged life when it comes to that. I was thinking of this is totally not a situation where I was discriminated against, but it's kind of a funny story. Back when I was recruiting, when I was doing college admissions for a Catholic university, I was doing a college fair, and a student came up to our table. And when you see the name of our school, it doesn't outright look like it's a religious institution at all. And the girl started asking me questions, and then she stopped, and she goes, "Wait a minute, are you a Catholic university?" And I said, "Yeah, we are. We're a Catholic Jesuit university." And she goes, "Oh, well, I'm not Catholic." And I go, and I said, "Well, funny story, neither am I. I'm actually an atheist." And she paused. She looked left. She looked right. And she leaned over the table and whispered, "Did they ever find out?" And, like, it was like this big, like, I was like hiding in a closet somewhere,
Right.
you know. And I just laughed about it, but it was like it was not an intimidating environment. Like, and I've always been in an environment that actually was very conducive to me asking questions and being skeptical. And you know, my parents weren't uber religious, so I didn't have kind of like what's usually the traditional story of a lot of atheists.
Right.
They start off as kind of like a backlash to being, you know, having kind of an overt religious upbringing. So, you know, the only story that I could really think of was actually my dad, who's not an atheist, but he grew up in kind of a Southern Baptist environment. And he never once did he ever really call himself this, but he just kind of got tired of church. Is basically the root of his secularism, I guess.
Right.
And just one day I think he was like high school age, said, "I'm not going anymore. I want to sleep in," you know, because
Right.
he was a teenager, and that's what teenagers want to do.
Which is fair.
And kind of as a result, you know, he's in a very small town, and not showing up to church is kind of almost like you're going to get blacklisted everywhere you go, you know?
Right.
And I don't know if it was anything that was like totally insufferable to him or not. He eventually left and ended up driving to Denver on a motorcycle with his backpack, and that's all he had with him. But yeah, I honestly, from my own personal experience, and just based off of what you see in the world, in terms of how people are thrown in jail for their beliefs, whether it's religious, political, whatever, I don't feel comfortable trying to like keep up with that type of you know, I'm not going to try to compare my strife or lack thereof to those that have actually gone through some pretty bad stuff.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. And for me personally, I'm in a similar boat that I have never, as I was trying to think about this question, the only thing that really came to mind was I was at a guy's house in Vegas that is, in my line of work, is an icon that everybody looks up to, and he is a, how would you describe it? Avid atheist. I don't know if that's an accurate description, but very vocal atheist.
Sure.
And so at his house, he took a couple of shots, just kind of subtle shots at my belief system, because he knows me well enough that he knew my beliefs, and they were just kind of underhanded, you know, like comments, but coming from someone with that kind of reputation, like, it hurt, but it's like, as far, like, on a grand scheme, I'm like, whatever. Like, that's not that big a deal.
Right.
And so for my, you know, for subject to my, you know, suffering because of my beliefs, as the question goes, it's like, it's pretty minimal, really.
Yeah.
Like, I've probably faced more resistance and comments from people within my belief system.
Sure.
You know, for putting on a wine and food festival and getting
protested.
Well, we got protested, which that's still epic. But just the backlash that has come from people that like are in the faith community about, that kind of idea. Like that's probably more.
And I should probably clarify, he got protested by an army of one.
Yeah, it was one guy.
It wasn't like a mass movement. It wasn't a Tea Party gathering or anything like that. It was one dude with a sign.
And the same guy just protested a sugar plum fairy festival and said sugar is a gateway drug.
Yeah.
Was that the quote?
Yeah, it was. It was.
So, that says a lot. All right. Moving on.
All right. Next one. Another one from Shanna Lee. She says, a light one. What podcasts are each of you loving right now and why?
I love this question.
I do too.
So you start.
Okay. I have Ty to thank for becoming a podcast junkie right now. Because prior to this, I'd actually never really even listened to a podcast. So thanks a lot. Ty is a gateway drug to podcast obsession.
I'm gonna get a picketer.
Yeah. And I listened to all the major ones. Like Serial is always one that's a kind of a good starter. S-Town was a really good one that Ty had recommended to me. So I really dig a lot of those kind of deep dive investigative journalism type ones. In the Dark is also another really good one. But my go-tos, really on a consistent basis, I love the Reason podcast from Reason Magazine. Not because I write for them occasionally, but they actually put out really good content. Mm-hmm. They do two different styles of episodes. One's their editors roundtable where they have their four main editors, which are Catherine Meggie Ward, Peter Gillespie, and Matt Welch, and Peter Suderman, and they're just really thoughtful, funny, articulate people covering the world's events. I really respect their opinions on a lot of the world. And they also do what they call the Soho Forum, where they do a Oxford-style debate about one issue, and they have one person who's in favor of the proposition, one person who's opposed to it. They take a poll beforehand and afterwards to see who won it. So it's really cool.
Oh, that's awesome.
I like that one. For the lighter ones, I love My Dad Wrote a Porno. This is possibly like one of the best gems I discovered really late. It's a gentleman who learned about his dad self-publishing erotica. And not like good erotica. I don't know what good erotica looks like, but it's poorly written. It's not sexy at all. And he and two other of his friends sit and read one chapter per week, and it is absolutely hysterical because there's these really quick-witted people, and they're British too, so they have these great accents that make the story even better. So those are kind of like my big ones, and then I always try to do I always like Planet Money. It's a good kind of econ nerd podcast that I enjoy too.
Right.
Yeah, I could go on. Actually, I've got a lot in my favorites that I follow.
Yeah, I was trying to look through my library, and I'm like, oh, we don't have time for this.
Yeah.
So I did listen to My Dad Wrote a Porno, got through the first 3 episodes, and I was like, this is just awkward.
It really is.
It was painfully awkward.
Well, can you imagine if you discovered if one of your parents was writing erotica?
That's what kept coming into my mind. I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. So,
but it's so good.
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious.
But it is not one I frequent. I will go with that. So one of my favorite podcasts, I am obsessed with whiskey, bourbon, American spirit. So one of my favorite podcasts is a podcast called The Podcask, which is all about bourbon drinking, but it's done in such a unpretentious way that it's actually appealing. The hosts are really personable and fun. And so that's definitely one I listen to all the time. I love Up and Vanished,
yes.
Which I know you actually turned me on to the new season that I didn't know was out yet.
Yeah, but you turned me on to the original one, so it's been quid pro quo.
Yeah, which it's starting to play. And so I love Up and Vanished. If you have not listened to that one, it is great. S-Town is still the best podcast ever done, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's going to be a tough one to top. Radiolab, This American Life, those are great. Everyday listens. On the faith side of things, I listen to The Liturgist, which is done by, I believe it's one of the members of the band Gungor, which the Christians will recognize that name as
because us atheists have no idea.
Yeah, you have no idea what I'm talking about. But they did a song called "Beautiful Things" that was like the anthem for a while. But it's kind of his take on faith, which has changed a lot since his actual initial thing. So it's kind of interesting. And then I love the Robcast, which is Rob Bell talking about different things on that side of things. And again, I could go on and on and on. There's a ton of them. The other one that you just mentioned, though, the Thunder Bay, is super interesting. I'm only like 3 episodes in, but that's one that caught my attention pretty quick.
Yeah, so. It's a weird story. For those that are not familiar, it's basically about how, I mean, it's one of the few non-American ones that I've listened to, because it's actually about how this particular location called Thunder Bay has a really large native population, and how they are basically murdered. Like, and I mean, they end up dead all the time, and in a really disproportionate rate too. So it's kind of a crazy story. And the story, like, I won't give away the ending, but I mean, it's kind of like S-Town. It leaves you kind of like, what the hell? You kind of go through this, and it just has so many different elements to it. You're like, it's kind of dizzying,
Absolutely.
Another one I forgot to include is one called The Argument. It's a really good one. It features 3 different New York Times op-ed columnists who all kind of have different political stripes, but even though they kind of, 2 of them lean left, and they're had this great conversation. Like, they obviously don't agree on everything, but it's this really civil dialogue about all the major issues, kind of one issue per week, and it
sounds like something we'd like.
Yeah. I don't know where I've heard of that before.
I don't know. Civil dialogue.
Yeah. What is that? So that's that. We probably dedicated way too much time to the podcast.
Shayna, if you need more, message us. We'll give you the full list.
Yeah. All right, next question. In your words, define atheism. I am under the impression that it's not a negative term, just a non-belief. And that's from Jolene Nowakowski, which I apologize if I butchered your name.
I love that she says it's not a negative term.
But I also love that in your own words. So, dirt box, just a bird box. Like, oh, you mean actually like English words?
Real words. Words.
Got it. So I guess this is kind of more directed at me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm going to let you take this one.
Okay, well, so the way I define atheism, and there was some kind of follow-up conversation in that question thread, too, that basically gave me the same answer, is that is if you can just break down the word just from its own roots. A means without, theism deals with belief in God.
Right.
I am without a belief in God. That's all there is to it. It doesn't mean I believe that God doesn't exist and I know it. So that's where we break down in the categories of agnostic atheism and Gnostic atheism. Agnostic atheism, which is what I'm lean more towards, is the equilibrium between a belief in God and full certainty of that belief. And if you're agnostic, you do not have full certainty of that belief because you feel like you can't prove it.
Right.
And that's basically what my stance is. I don't believe in God, but I can't prove that scientifically, know. And I think it's because you're dealing with questions that really can't be answered by science.
Yep.
And that's where I stand on it. I think you'll find a more militant version of atheism that is very certain of that assertion, and that's fine. People are free to have that belief. But where I kind of draw the line a lot of times with these folks is that they tend to take this belief into being kind of a projectile against anything that has to do with religion, which I'm not really cool with. So I
see episode 1.
Right. Yeah. It's all coming full circle.
That's right. We're trying.
So the notion that that you can prove it, that's up to what I really believe is the scientific method, and I don't see how you can have a falsifiable claim that could be answered about that. So my stance is that if you're just talking about the general term about atheism, it doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It just is simply about the belief of it. And that's kind of where I stand on that. So yeah.
Done and done.
Done and done.
I was going to
read
the
next one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just talked a lot.
Sure.
I figured I'd let
do
you
that
drink
sometimes.
a little. Next question comes from Peter Nethington, who, by reading this question, kind of sounds like he had been drinking a little. But it says...
No judgment?
No judgment. Why is it so hard to ask questions of people you respect and enjoy hanging out and having conversation with? I don't know where he's going with this entirely.
I think maybe kind of the point is, it's people who you have a lot of respect for, maybe you're close friends with, but they might have some beliefs that don't jive with you, like the Earth is flat and the moon landing was faked,
was in a studio,
right? And then you, how do you backpedal from that? Do you think that it's okay to not question friends and family, or I don't know. That's kind of what I kind of picked it up as. If you like someone, is it hard to stir up controversy with them by questioning them?
And maybe why I have a struggle with the question is that I don't think that's ever something I've experienced with people that I'm close with. If I respect and enjoy someone, we're going to have those conversations, and we're still going to be friends and hang out afterwards.
Right.
And so I haven't ever had a situation, I think, where I've had that conversation with someone that I'm close with, and at the end of it, it's like, oh yeah, we're never going to speak again.
Right. Right.
With those people, it's like we can disagree on this, and then at the end of the day, it's like, all right, let's go have a beer.
Right.
So
yeah, agree to disagree. Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I have a lot of friends and family and the rest of humanity who don't see the world as I do. So if I held
maybe a stretch.
Yeah, well, I mean, if I held a litmus test for if you only agree with me 100% on everything, then you could be my friend.
I think we're both screwed.
Yeah. So I honestly I feel like the people I do love and respect, I feel open enough to be able to just call them on their crap, here and there, and I'd hope they reciprocate as well too, because I think that's the only way we really kind of maintain ourselves and keep ourselves in check.
Yeah.
And the more I think about the question too, I'm wondering if Pete kind of felt bad for us because we weren't getting a lot of questions originally.
He is definitely one of our faithful listeners.
Yeah.
And, was trying to help us out at that point. But then he follows it up with this question.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one.
Which is a great question. So he says, serious question now. With so many people in their mid-30s and 40s leaving institutions of faith, have either of you ever thought about switching sides, so to speak? And there's some quotation marks in there. And has anything convinced you that your views are really just faith and nothing else? Have you ever thought of switching sides, Jay?
As if like you guys would trade for me or something like that. Like I was a free agent.
That's right.
The Christians are looking for a shortstop. Yeah, no, so do I have doubts? Yeah,
Right.
for sure. I don't, and I think maybe even like passively, I've been like, I've thought about, what would my life be like if I went to church or if I was a Christian? Would my life be easier? Because I think that was one of my original thoughts when I was moving to our community, because it is a very,
Very Christian.
very Christian heavy, not, pejoratively heavy, but anyway, that's another conversation. Very predominant Christian community, and would my life be easier if I just went along with the flow and went to church with folks, and I think those are just kind of passing thoughts. I never really thought that I would ever switch sides. I'm always open to it. Like when I was going to a Catholic university, I went to Mass. I went and participated in Mass of the Holy Spirit and all the major events that they did too, just to kind of be with friends and things of that nature. But I never felt pressured to convert or anything of that nature. But I mean, at the end of the day, it is, I guess you could say what I have is some type of faith, but it's not. It's kind of a strange way of putting it, because I don't. It's just like I said before in the previous question about defining atheism. It's just there's just no belief there, Like It's just a lack thereof, which I guess in a weird kind of way of interpreting it is kind of a faith, because it's a worldview that I hold to that doesn't have any backing to other than just what my belief is. So. And I guess it is just kind of in my opinion, the neutral position in terms of the way the world looks. But I don't know if I'd ever say I heartfeltly considered switching sides, I guess is the best way to put it. And I hate the notion of it being like
sides
diametrically opposed, like as opposed like we can't ever bridge that divide ever,
Yeah, and I think we've said it on this, even on the podcast before, that both of us get to a point where you can no longer prove your stance. And so from beyond that, it becomes an element of faith.
Right.
Whether it's, atheism or Christianity, there is an element of faith in that. For me, have I ever thought about, quote unquote, switching sides? I would probably say frequently, because it is such a daunting worldview that you're consistently wrestling with.
Sure.
Because I think we very much agree on the idea of scientifically proving and facts and those kind of things, and we both get to this point where we go, that's it. Like that's as far as you can prove it.
Right.
And so then there's this element of like, oh shit, like now what?
Yeah. Well, and then the way I kind of see it is that we've all walked to the cliff's edge, and for me, I'm like, I look over, and I go, okay, it's all downhill from here, And for those with faith, they kind of stick their foot out, like they just. I'm not saying you take a step, but you kind of are like, there's something there,
right?
There's something there, and I do kind of feel like this question is more geared towards you,
right?
Because
I could see that.
Like I said, mine's more of a neutral position, and yours is one of making some kind of bigger claims too,
right? Yeah, and I think, as I continually wrestle with this on probably a daily basis, where you look at the world and you look at things and you look at facts and you wrestle with this idea, I continually come back to, certain things that have come up repeatedly, of whether it's personal experiences or life transformation or things like that, where you look at those things and go like, okay, like science can't explain this phenomenon.
Right.
And so a lot of faith is put in those things.
Sure.
So have I ever thought about switching sides? Absolutely. And I'd probably make a lot more money if I switch sides. I feel like, because I've said for a long time, if I
The
wasn't
atheist game is hot right now.
well, I've always said if I didn't have morals, like, man,
What?
I could
What?
just be like,
Wait a minute.
you know,
Wait a minute. Wait a minute.
I mean, we can go back to that debate, but if I didn't believe there was a higher power, I just wouldn't
If
have.
you didn't have morals, then you probably should run for office.
I could be president.
Yeah.
So-
You're going to make America great again.
Has that been used? I feel like that'd be a good campaign slogan.
I think MAGA stands for My Attorney Got Arrested. Sorry, we're switching topics there. Sorry about that.
Shifting gears. All right.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. So all right. Next question, which I'm going to use your real name because I know your real name. It's not Diedrich Mason. Your name is Derek Mason. Quit trying to French it up or Italian it up, whatever it is. The question is, would you please consider watching The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina and consider commenting on how the Church of Satan is represented and its underlying tones of organized religion and lack thereof? So, when I originally fielded this question,
originally it wasn't fielded as a question.
Right?
Let's be clear.
I had to chime the buzzer and say, you have to answer it like Jeopardy, you know.
Well, he did answer it as Jeopardy.
Right.
That was the problem.
Right. So, to be perfectly honest, I didn't do my reading for this homework assignment.
No, I haven't watched it yet.
So, because when the way he described it, I was expecting this to be like an investigative Netflix series about like some girl that was part of the Church of Satan or something like that. And I come to find out it's like a redo of Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
I haven't even looked that much into it.
Yeah, so I looked at it, and I'm sorry, Derek, I didn't watch it. My bandwidth is very limited for Netflix, so I really only want to dedicate to stuff I want to watch. So maybe another episode we'll get into this, but I didn't watch it, so I don't feel like it's in my right nature to actually comment on it.
I would agree completely.
So,
I mean, I will put it on the list. If I have a 4-hour flight in 2019, I will download this so I can watch it.
You heard it here. We're going to hold him to that because this dude flies a lot.
Yeah.
But does it have to be specifically 4 hours?
No, not
Okay.
anything over the length of I have no idea how long it is.
I don't know either, but I have a bad feeling it's not good.
If you're just tuning in, my wife has just said she's going to watch what was it called?
The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
So, and she's going to consider commenting on how the Church of Satan is representing and its underlying tones of organized religion and lack thereof.
I know.
So we're going to get feedback from a third party on this at the very least.
That feels like such a college question, too. Like I have to write a paper on that.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen. Okay. Next question from John Robert Harvey. 7 states, last time I checked, and I double-checked too, and he's correct, have laws forbidding non-monotheists from holding office. Should more states adopt this or similar positions? So,
for the small-minded and unclarified people as of myself, please explain that in terms that make sense.
Sure, layman's terms. Got it. Monotheists being people who believe in one mono god. There are actual laws on the books at the state level that include a religious test for those that if you lack faith in one God, which obviously the 3 main monotheistic religions are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, you cannot actually hold office unless you are of a monotheistic faith, which is true, actually, and it's crazy that still
Frightening.
exists. Yeah, yeah. And there is.
Do you know the 7 states offhand?
No, but I can Google it real quick.
That's
but
all right.
and
Continue.
it's kind of a smattering that it's kind of surprising too when you look them up. But the strange thing about this is that one of the most vital principles to our country is separation of church and state,
Right.
and that is articulated well in the Constitution, where it actually has a ban on religious tests. But the Constitution is specifically regards federal positions,
yeah.
so that's president and
Right.
Congress and those types of things. At the state level, it's just a free for all. So there might be a day where something like this gets challenged in the Supreme Court, and they all are wiped off clean. And so, obviously, to answer John's specific question is no, there should not be any more of that. And I think most reasonably minded people would agree with that, which is kind of surprising that there is still 7 states that have that on the books. And whether they're super enforced, I don't really know.
Right.
It's like one of those things that could be kind of passive. But what's strange about this too is that you can have that on the books, and it being a legal matter. That's one thing, but you can also have it not on the books and it being culturally reinforced too.
Yeah.
Like the notion of an atheist president is.
Asinine.
Yeah,
Like,
arguably, I would say that Donald Trump is our most irreligious president we've ever had.
I could very much see that.
He's also embraced by evangelicals too, which is a
Right.
really awkward.
It's such a strange,
dynamic, right?
Such a strange.
This is the guy that got up in front of everybody and said that one of his favorite verses was 2 Corinthians, right? Yeah, and so the guy doesn't. He knew that he had to cater to that type of voting, but I don't think he's actually religious at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And I would kind of think the same about the preceding president too, or the previous president too, with Barack Obama. I don't necessarily think that he was not a spiritual person, but he never came across as a deeply religious person either. But he put on a good show about it. Especially when people thought he was a Muslim, which was, of course, not true.
Yeah.
As if that was a bad thing anyway.
Right.
But either way. So no, to answer that question, obviously, no, there should not be more of that. There should be absolutely less of that.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. Because
Did you look up the states?
No, I was trying to find it, and I didn't quickly find it, so I figured I'd answer the question before I kept Googling.
I'll look it up.
When it comes down to the separation of church and state, which is a great transition to the next question.
Right.
But, my support of someone in office is going to come from leadership skills and knowledge and everything that has nothing to do with religion or monotheism.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm kind of shocked that that's 7 states is a decent percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's not small in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
But I would say you're probably right that it's one of those like, oh, it's still in there. But as long as you don't say anything and no one asks, then it's never going to come up again.
Mm-hmm.
Because I wonder how many people in that state actually know of that particular rule.
Right. Yeah, and I again though that's where you, like I said, you draw that fine line between legal and culturally reinforced, because the idea of a president not being able to say "God bless America" and mean it is something that I'm not entirely certain that the American voter is quite ready for. And actually, there's been some studies about that. where polls found that out of all of the faith categories, atheist was the absolute last that people trusted in terms of holding a higher office.
Please see previous episodes where this was discussed in further length.
Yeah, I feel like we need like a reference page here.
That'd be nice. Back. Just click here and then you can go back.
Yeah.
And I can totally see how especially in some of the like Bible Belt states, how even if that isn't necessarily legal terminology, it is just small town understood.
Right.
If you're not this, then you're out. Like, don't even try.
Right.
And so but the problem with that is that's where you get Trump cases where they jump through the hoops because people aren't dumb. Like, you know what you have to do to get what you want.
Right.
And so you're going to say or do whatever you need to get to that spot, whether that's real or not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of sad that you have to have that sort of cultural hoop to jump through.
Can we just start being honest?
Right. Yeah. So, and I wasn't able to Google it either, so we'll just keep moving on.
Yeah.
And
if we figure out the 7 states, we'll throw it up on a post or something.
Sure. And then we'll just throw mad shade at those states too.
I hope it's not Colorado.
No, it's not. Okay. I looked. I ran for office. No. Yeah. Which is a kind of a good point about cultural reinforcement of it.
Yeah,
depending on the culture.
Yeah.
Because I was pretty open about it. I ran for office and I did okay. You
know? It was very close race.
Right. And I do. So going back to one of the first questions about being discriminated against because of your views, I did hear one anecdotal account of one of my volunteers that said that they could never vote for me because I was an atheist.
Right.
That's probably the worst thing that's happened to me.
Yeah.
So that one voter coup, I lost that one vote.
Yeah.
But
I had a pastor tell me they could never support my ministry because of my beliefs. So,
your beliefs in
theology.
Drinking?
Well, no, not that one. Not that one. I've probably had others since then that have said that. But
all right. So then to kind of maintain this subject, we go to Jeff Turner's last question. For public elected officials, where do you feel the line between church and state should be drawn, considering that most religious individuals see their faith as something of the utmost importance to their reality? So, this is a question that's really geared towards our elected leaders,
Correct.
And obviously, as I've alluded to before, a lot of these elected leaders state some type of religious faith, and there's not any openly atheist members of Congress that I'm aware of, and so that's kind of the question: is where do we draw the line between church and state, and where do we hold our elected leaders to maintain that line? And for some of them, do we allow that to be the only thing that dictates the way that they govern our country?
Right.
I think is kind of the best way to frame those questions.
Well, and for me, I would say, religion is obviously going to influence your worldview.
Correct.
And how you feel that should operate.
Right.
And so if your worldview holds to certain standards, then that's what your election platform is going to be based on.
Right.
Now, I don't think you should ever be preaching politics, and I don't think you should ever be trying to convert from office. Like, you're not trying to recruit people to your religion while you're in office. You're doing a different job there. Mm-hmm. And if you are a pastor, you should not be trying to convince people how they should vote. And so there's no way no way you could ever separate someone's religion worldview from how they campaign.
Sure.
Because that's your worldview. Like,
Mhm.
that's how you see how this world should be ran.
Sure.
And so as long as you hold by that, I'm okay with that. Like, I don't care if that's the stance you take. I would prefer, really, you don't bring religion into it. You just state, this is my belief in said point, whether that's, abortion or whatever it is. And I just use those hot topics because those are the ones that are going to get thrown around anyways.
Pretty much.
And so I would say those are going to get thrown out there, but there's no reason to side that with a religion. But the problem is, as we've already stated, that we know doing so can actually be beneficial.
Right.
And so people are going to continue to leverage the religious side of things to garnish votes.
Sure. And I think that's the best way you put it is that these are your first principles, right?
Right.
Like your worldview is guided by what these first principles are, and I think there is still a lot of common ground with those first principles that are not determined by organized religion, right?
Agreed.
So there are, just even the basic golden rule is one that's widely adopted by every faith,
right?
Pretty much. So that no particular faith has a monopoly on those principles. And it's okay to maintain those principles and campaign on those principles and get elected on those principles. I think where I draw the line in terms of faith and politics is when it becomes more of a bludgeon on policy that forces certain things. I don't know. That's my very technical term, things. So let me try to clarify that. I think whenever religion is used as a bludgeon to enforce certain policies that go against people's civil liberties, just for an example, the ban on people coming from Muslim countries. I see that as an attempt to try to enforce a particular religious narrative on the greater population,
right.
And that's where I draw the line. So when your faith then becomes something that can undermine the right of other people to live with liberty and dignity, is where I say that's no go for me. And that's not necessarily a clear line, because I think there's some issues that, as one that you mentioned, abortion, that is not a well-defined sort of moral landscape, I think is the best way to put it. Because I understand both sides of that debate. Right. I lean in one particular direction, but I also get the moral arguments that are made against it, and I also understand the moral arguments made for it. So, it's one of those issues that I struggle with. Like when you were talking about struggling with your faith, this is one in particular that I do too. Yeah. Because I do think that people have self-autonomy. I think they have the right to do with their body as they so please, so long as it doesn't infringe upon other people's rights to do the exact same. But also, there's a life that's occurring.
That's exactly where the debate starts, because there is another
person,
right?
Kind of and that's where the debate is, right? Yeah. Where does viability start?
Yep.
And I don't have the answer for that. I really don't.
But I think just to lean on the question, I think the problem is use those lines, but when you start trying to leverage religion
Correct.
with those lines,
Correct.
I think then you're doing it inappropriately.
Correct.
Because moral beliefs or whatever, you can argue for one side or the other, but if you start trying to leverage with,
Right.
you know, the book,
Yeah, absolutely.
or whatever,
Like if
then you're pushing it.
Right. So if a Supreme Court justice said, abortion is illegal because God,
Right.
that's an obvious line.
Right.
But so I think it's hard because I think we've kind of run into a particular group of Christians that do maintain that their faith is the one driving force of everything.
Right.
And I do think that this question is kind of geared towards the religious right,
Right.
And so is it, where do they draw that line, And
and the funny thing is like they draw that line and that creates their vote regardless of the person they're voting for.
Right.
Like, which we've seen now. But that's an interesting swing where if you are relying solely on one side or the other, it can push you to vote for something that may be, anti what you really are.
Sure.
Which is crazy.
Sure.
So.
And it's honestly, it's a question that I freely admit that I don't have the answers to, because I think in kind of a new case that's coming up right now is, do people have a right? Let's just say you're an employer. Employers typically have to provide health care for their employees. If you have a religious objection to birth control, should you be forced to provide birth control to your employees? And I think that's kind of where we've run into the issue of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. Can you force this person to provide birth control coverage to people who don't have that same objection, but the employer does?
Right. Yeah.
And we're not going to answer that question on this podcast, but that's where it's honestly it is a tough question,
Yeah.
So again, we don't have the answers, obviously.
But hopefully we'll a small insight.
Sure.
That line should be. I think that line should be bigger than what a lot of people think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think more people should be able to say, "I don't know."
Yes. I would argue for that all the time.
Yeah. Those are my 3 favorite words.
Yep. And very, fitting most of the time.
Yeah.
Well, we're back.
Here
we are, solving the world's problems, hopefully. At least a little bit. Which we are going to, I'm going to tease this a little because we have a new segment that we're going to be starting.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's on a lost episode that was never put out to the world. I think that's the one it's on now that I'm
It is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Sorry if I let you hanging there.
No, that's all right. So I think
I wanted to see you sweat.
It's fair.
Like in your old garage.
Oh, yes. Isn't it nice being in like a heated indoor real bar?
This is an upgrade.
It's a huge upgrade.
Thanks for buying a new studio.
Yeah, that's right. And eventually we'll actually have a studio space, hopefully, in here.
Yeah, this works.
It's good for now.
Yeah.
But we are going to introduce a new segment in the next episode where we are solving really crucial, whether toilet paper goes over or under.
I have
world problems.
Serious opinions about that, by the way.
You and me both.
Okay.
You and me both.
Oh, I can't wait to hash this one out.
How to how to properly drive in parking lots and those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of every show, we're going to solve the real issues in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So tune in for that. Thank you for hanging with us. For new people that are just tuning in, welcome. Go back, start from the beginning. It's been this terrible all along, but at least you'll know what we're talking about. So
we made a lot of references to previous episodes.
Exactly.
So yeah, they have to go back and
we're
listen.
trying to tease all the past.
Yeah.
Season 1.
Yeah.
Season 1.
Prequel.
So, well, with that, close this out, Jay.
You are listening to a Christian and an atheist walk into a bar where we solve the world's problems one adult beverage at a time.
Cheers.